Hello and welcome to episode 163 of the Chills of Will podcast. It's a pleasure today to be joined by, and I didn't really even ask, Margo Candela.
Hmm. Yes.
Okay. I've seen it spelled out a million times. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. Margo Candela was born and raised in Los Angeles and began her writing career when she joined Glendale Community College's student newspaper. She transferred to San Francisco State University as a journalism major, and upon graduation began writing for websites and magazines before writing her first two novels, Underneath It All and Life Over Easy. She returned to Los Angeles to raise her son and wrote More Than This and Goodbye to All That. The Neapolitan Sisters is her fifth novel and her first after a decade-long hiatus from writing. She now lives in San Francisco. Good evening. How are you?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Good. I mean, after a decade-long hiatus, it's like people waiting for like that next Dr. Dre album after so many years. Like, man, this you nailed it, and we're gonna talk about that. But congratulations on the Neapolitan Sisters, and thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
me. Anything you
My
wanted to
pleasure.
add to the bio? Anything that I got wrong?
Well, there's a lot of stuff that happened between
In
those
between,
10, between goodbye to all that and the Neapolitan sisters. But I think, that's for therapy.
right? Oh. Thanks again so much for joining me. I'm excited to talk to you. I love to go back to the beginnings, beginning of reading and language and words. Um, Now, with your parents both being from Mexico, is that correct?
Yes. Mhm.
So, I mean, was Spanish your first language? Did you learn them concurrently?
I had two older sisters, and they were already in school. So we were always bilingual.
Okay.
But I don't recall ever having a problem with going from Spanish to English.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, it just was normal.
Yeah.
But we went to school in Lincoln Heights, for kindergarten, first grade, and such. I did. And it was all in English, but I never had a problem with going back and forth with it. I think until I got older,
Mm-hmm.
then it was primarily we were all in. I know it was always a mix.
Yeah.
Mm.
Was that something where your parents would be like, hey, if you're gonna speak Spanish, or was Spanglish okay?
My mother is notorious for the Spanglish. My
Ah.
father, not so much. My father, we basically converse in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of my biggest achievements is being able to make him laugh in Spanish, right? Which
Ah.
is, kind of a hot trick on my part.
Uh.
Plus, he's very stingy with his laughter. So, my mother she will go back and forth within the same sentence,
Nice.
and then the made up words there too, also.
One of the wonders of the world, right? Spanglish is so incredible.
You think it's the right word until somebody looks at you funny.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but any good jokes in Spanish?
Usually, what we do is we make fun of each other, so it's kind of
Okay,
particular.
okay, okay.
It's one of those families, yeah.
I heard a good one recently. It's ¿listas? ¿Lista?
Mhm.
¿Qué es la broma? Okay. ¿Qué dijo la uva verde a la uva morada?
No sé qué dijo.
Respira, tonto.
Okay.
Right? Okay, moving
You
on,
could
moving
tell that
on.
one to your
Right?
grandma.
Exactly. Keep it clean. Got to keep it clean. I don't know any of the Pepito jokes. I'm keeping myself clean. Okay. I love for you to talk about 3320 Pepper Avenue.
The library.
What's the
Yeah.
significance for you?
That was one of the only places besides catechism in church that
Mm.
we were allowed to go to at, n- not because we wanted to. Like we didn't want to go to church and we didn't want to go to catechism. That was the only way we got our allowance. But we were allowed to go to the library as much as we wanted to on our own. And that's where I discovered how wonderful books are, and just the endless possibilities that you
Mm.
could find at a library. Like there was a whole place dedicated to whatever you wanted. And it was a really beautiful, interesting building. So
Mm.
I still have a lot of great memories of, of the library. And I wish I would have like realized at the time how special it was, other than it was just like, if I don't feel like watching TV, I can go to the library kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
one of the greatest inventions of humankind, right? The library. I mean,
Yes, I mean it's free,
it's
and
free.
it's and the people there, for the most part, you get some oddballs, but they really do have a love of reading and books
Oh yeah.
and information and
Yes.
helping, and they're plugged into their community.
Mhm.
So it's a wonderful resource.
Totally. When I'm trying to demonstrate maybe to my students or my kids or whatever, like somebody who loves their job, like one of the first that comes to mind is the librarian, right?
Well, it's a calling,
Yeah,
it
no
really,
doubt.
really is. I mean,
No
you
doubt.
don't do it for the money and the glamour, that's
No,
for sure.
no, no. It's like the back. I mean, they still have the call numbers, of course. Remember, pre-internet and all that, like the call numbers, and they would be so excited to like, oh, the 700s, social studies, and like knew like the back of their hand. Right?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
were you reading at the library? What were you into?
I worked my way from like the kids section, right, and then the young adult section into nonfiction, and then just like the classics. And then I also was a huge, because we read so much. I mean, we
Hmm.
read as much as we ate and drank,
Huh.
So uh, I read a ton of paperbacks. Those were kind of like desserts, because you just consumed them
Yeah.
really fast, and there was always another one. And I just remember standing there and turning the little display and looking at the spines. A
Display.
lot of Stephen
Yeah.
King too. I mean, those were
Okay.
always really good, immersive, fun reads.
Fun.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
because it was just an
No, no.
enjoyable story. I mean, you knew
Yeah.
you were going to get a really great middle. I mean, sometimes I'm not going to talk smack about Stephen King, but sometimes the endings were a little, the spider thing always kind of got me.
Oh, I don't know
He has
about
a
the
thing
spider
with
thing.
spiders. I
Oh.
don't know what his issue is, but he has one.
Did he write Arachnophobia? Is that his book?
I don't know. I don't
Okay.
recall that
Might have
one,
been
but I
different.
just
Okay.
remember there was a lot of giant spiders here and there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Did you feel represented in what you read? Did you feel like you're reading
No,
about no
no,
period?
and it didn't even occur to me that I wasn't being represented. I was just there to read. I was just a voracious reader. Um, I think that awareness didn't happen until much, much later, as far as what my voice meant to me, and my unique point of view. That never occurred to me while I was at the library. I think I was
Mm.
reading with just open eyes, not necessarily looking for anything except for a really good story.
Yeah. As you got into high school and college and stuff, did you find who were the writers and the writing that really inspired you, thrilled you? Were you reading some like, hey, they also are, bilingue, or, someone from my area? Or was it again just like the story, the story, the story?
It was always the story. I
Yeah.
think I think it till this day. I mean, a good writing is good writing. It doesn't
Mm.
matter who does it, and that's what I am a Latina, and I do write from a Latina perspective, and I do write Latina and Latino characters. But my goal is to tell a good story, so whoever reads it can relate to the story, and maybe learn a little something about something
Mm.
they don't know or someone they don't know. But I don't necessarily, I mean, it's a privilege to be able to do what I do, and to be able to share my perspective, is, I mean, first of all, it's kind of like, where does she get off, uh, but I think especially now, when you do notice that certain stories are being told again and again by the same people,
Mm.
um, diversity does matter, because it normalizes um, a different perspective,
Mm.
and I think with the Neapolitan sisters, one of the things I wanted to kind of blow up was the the kind maternal tamale making mom in
Mm.
cliche,
Mm.
um, where I knew I was taking a risk by basically saying the mom in the Neapolitan sisters is not a good mother.
Mm.
Um, and that was really risky because people don't take kindly to you talking smack about Mexican mommies.
Mm.
And I was like, I'm a mother myself, and I had to, as I was raising my son, I had to take a hard look in the mirror and see where I failed him. And so I was really interested in exploring a failing of of two parents
Mm.
through the perspective of three sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something I was at my age and what I've been through and, where I am in life, I was ready to just do it, and without apology and without overly explaining myself.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that's one of the things that was risky,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't explain how bad the mother was, but she's not a good mom. And the dad, is a loving father, but an ineffectual parent.
Ineffectual is the
So,
word for sure.
yeah, but who can't relate to that? I mean,
Mm.
parents fail all the time, and some of them do it in spectacular fashion.
Right. Right. We learn a lot from our parents about what to do or what not to do, right?
Yes. I mean, I'm really grateful for my parents, good sense of humor and, just they raised me to be a decent person. But I knew when I went into raising my son, there were certain things I wasn't going to do and tried not to do. And,
Mm.
you know, um, my kid is basically normal. So I think I did an okay job.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Mhm.
So you've done a lot of work before this. This is your fifth book, and the Neapolitan Sisters. I like to ask about like the seeds for the book, and that would probably intersect with some of the others, right? I mean, it's a 10-year hiatus. I
Mhm.
don't know if it's exactly 10 years, a decade long.
Pretty much, yeah, I would
Yeah,
say so, yeah.
and but just like I mean, were you working on this? I mean, I just feel like this is just like a coming together. Like the book the book is a saga. It doesn't take place over a lot of years. I mean, there are flashbacks, of course,
Mhm.
but it's mainly what, 2003.
2003, a month.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. Around in the marriage time and stuff. But like, I guess just like were you working on this and like 25 years ago you had some ideas for this, but it never went anywhere? Like, I mean, is this book something you wrote like beginning to end in 2 years, or it goes way back? How does it work with the hiatus and just like the seeds for this particular book?
I honestly, I think definitely started around 2003 because that's where it's set and that's where I decided to keep it. And I had a completed draft within a year,
Oh wow.
and but it was rough, right? And it
Yeah.
was short and it was rough. And I would open it here and there, and then I wrote other books in between the other, Life
Mm-hmm.
Over Easy, Underneath It All, and Goodbye to All That, and More Than This. And the tone of this book, even though it was a rough draft, was, other than the humor that was there, it was so much different than what I had written. And I had an agent at the time who was confused as to what I was trying to do.
Mm.
And I knew, and I didn't have that support system. And I also wasn't ready to take the book as far as it needed to go. So it sat in a draft for years and years and years
Mm.
and I would open it every so often, and just kind of look at it and then put it away. But it was, it was a solid story
Yeah.
already. And I remember, it was always in the back of my mind. And when Tony Kirkpatrick at Alcove asked me if I had anything, I sent her a different book because I wasn't, I was hedging my bets.
Mm-hmm.
And she rightly told me that it wasn't ready, but did I have something else? And I pulled up my pants and I said, here,
Mm.
I think I'm ready, I'm ready to take a risk. And I've been quiet for so long, I'm going to see what happens. And she responded very positively to it. She really, really, really resonated with her, and
Mm.
she, optioned it. And then I knew I could make it better. And that's where I spent an intense, like, 3 months
Mm.
revising it and polishing it and adding things to it. Then, and I got her notes, and then she, sparked some ideas. So I think if you were to read the first rough draft, you would see, the beginnings of the story. But I think what I ended up with, and when I finally had to say I have to stop,
Mm-hmm.
like I just need to turn it in and not tweak it anymore, or not, obsess about it. I think it is the book that it could only be with all those years between the first
Yes.
draft and to that, me saying to myself, I'm going to go for it, and
Mm.
I'm going to finally say this book deserves to be read.
All right. I wonder about any challenges with well, so I mean the book is written in first is written in present tense. There are flashbacks we talk about, but like, it's not he said, it's he says. But
Mhm.
just first person, and it's I believe it's only the sisters who get the wheel, right? The sisters Maritza and Dulcina, who goes by Dooley, right? And then Claudia, and but they are the narrators of the different chapters, and
Mhm.
there are a lot of chapters. So like I wonder about how you're able to keep like a consistency. You talk about doing it over so many years, like I kind of liken it to if I were to stop recording right now and then we started recording again in 40 minutes, like maybe my throat is scratchy, or you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like keeping that consistency. How are you able to keep a consistency, a seamlessness throughout the voices?
For me, each sister was always very distinct.
Okay.
Even Maritza, because at first she was I think the cloudiest for me. Like I had the hardest time connecting with her on a personal level.
Mm.
Um, but they all were very distinct characters. And the trick was, I mean, I don't know, I make things difficult for myself, but to me it just makes sense. I wrote the chapters in sequence. So I never, I knew I wanted to balance out who got a chapter when and what
Mm.
followed what. So no sister had back-to-back chapters. Each
Right.
chapter has a beginning, middle, and end. Then you go to the next chapter, and that's the other sister. So I wrote, it opens with Maritza, then goes to Claudia, then goes to Julie, then goes back, so I wrote it in that order.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I did when I started to refine it, first of all, there was a lot of cussing in the book. And there was a lot. Like I went through and I counted and I was like, well, that's a lot of variations of the F word. And then I realized the only one who would probably cuss is Claudia.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be out of character for Maritza to cuss. Like she's very like kind of ladylike.
Mm-hmm.
And Julie is probably did most of her cussing while drunk, so she's sober now. She doesn't cuss.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and then so Claudia got all the F words. And there are certain word choices because as sisters, they grew up together, and so they would have some similarities. But I kept certain speech patterns to one sister, and certain, like, instead of saying like anyways, Maritza says anyways, because she's kind of like, forget what I was talking about,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
maybe the deeper thing I might have touched on. Anyways, let's move on from that.
Mm.
So in my head, while I was writing it, I could hear their voices, and they had different tempos,
Mm.
different pitches. Uh, until when they were all together, then in my own mind, like, they all started to sound like their inflections maybe went more East LA, instead of, Claudia's modulated to be, like have not have an accent anymore.
Hmm. Was there a lot of reading out loud then?
I did read some things out loud, and there was also this kind of reading like,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
just to kind of, sometimes you do have to hear it.
yeah.
Because for me, I mean, there's a constant conversation in my head.
Hmm.
And sometimes you have to say it out loud to say, like, would somebody really say this? Especially for me with male characters. I think men have a much different word choice and different tempo than the way women talk. So I've always been very, I listen to people. And so when I'm writing dialogue for a male character or even inner dialogue, I have to ask myself, does this sound like a man?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I do read books where the man does not sound like a man, I get really annoyed because not many men. I read this one hockey series, like, during COVID, the first lockdown. I just read this whole series of hockey-based romance books, and one of the hockey players who was like a defenseman, and he said the word fabulous, and I was like, no, I would not say the word fabulous, and I think for me, it's just one of those things. Since I do listen, I'm a pretty good listener.
Mm-hmm.
I try to really make dialogue sound believable.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool to hear. I'm sure it was a lot of strain on you, all the rewriting and writing, of the audio part of it. But it's like it's so cool to hear how much work you put into it, because it comes off, smoothly. You don't, as a reader, you don't think about it, which is, I think, the point, right?
I hope you don't think about it. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that would take you out of the story.
exactly.
I love dialogue. I really do love writing dialogue. It's one of my, because I mean, what's better than a really good back and forth conversation with someone where it's like a tennis match. You know, in real life, I really enjoy when I do get with somebody who's very verbal, and we can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That to me is just such a joy and a treat. And when you write for a living, you can do that in your imagination, and you can have a perfectly tuned conversation.
Do you ever watch the Gilmore Girls?
I When it first came out, and it
Yeah.
was, yeah, I tried to watch it again, and it actually was too fast for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a small sample size to draw from, and obviously as a man, but like I remember watching it, and I was just like, their dialogue is like too good. Like
Mhm.
just like every comment was just like, had like a historical allusion, or was like
Mm.
peppy and snappy. The dialogue in your book was so fun, and it was just so like snappy, but like realistic. And I mean, Claudia just had some zingers.
Claudia, okay, I will admit, I think you did ask one part that did make me laugh out loud, and I had to pat myself on the back,
Mhm.
was where
Love
when
hearing it.
her assistant, she sends it when she's like talking about sending her assistant out to get her dry cleaning and
Yeah,
her
yeah, yeah.
juice, and she says, "I don't give an F what she drives to pick up my sandwich or whatever." And I found that so funny, like who wouldn't want to just have that kind of attitude?
Yeah.
And I think that was a really good use of the F word too. For
Right.
me,
Can't
it
believe.
was because I think the F word is for me, it's one of my favorite words. It really, really is. And when I get to use it in a way that is just so pointy and
Yeah.
so casual,
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
In real life, I mean, to have that moment where something like that pops out of your mouth, and I mean, I'm a very, like I said, very verbal person, and I know I can rat-a-tat-tat sometimes, um, and it's a lot of fun, to have a really high-powered conversation. It does get
Right.
exhausting after a
Right.
while,
Right.
but I've here and there I've had some really really good conversations with people, even sometimes when it was one-sided, and I was just basically using them like when you play handball and you just hitting that ball against the wall. when I,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, so
They're the wall in that comparison.
they're the
Dang.
wall, yes. And sometimes they stand there because they're kind of stunned. But conversation and word choice and snappy dialogue, I appreciate that, as a consumer too.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. Dialogue is definitely one of my weaknesses, and I appreciate, as a writer myself, but I appreciate the when people pull it off for sure. The book starts off with a description of the parents,
mhm,
and the idea of their mother, the girl's mother, very does not want Maritza, who's about to get married, does not want her to wear white.
mhm,
It's her second marriage, right? Which is disappointing the mom. Mom's a churchgoer, right? Maritza later says, I didn't, that she writes, she talks about how she didn't budget for a gazebo.
mhm,
But says a lot about her, where she says, it doesn't mean I don't have a plan. I know exactly what I'm doing. I always have. She works for the Kims,
mhm.
right? She's like, I mean, it seems like maybe they're like only employee,
Yes,
right?
it's
I
a
mean, she's been with
family
them for
business.
yeah, it's a family
Mhm,
business. She's been with them for years. The way that she's able to like scold Mr. Kim, it could
mhm.
only happen if she's been part of the family. So yeah, she's, I don't know, she ditzy is not the word, because she's very smart. She's 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 been saving money for her house, but she's like, I don't know, she's like Disney princess romantic. How would you describe Maritza? She's not a, like you said, she's not like a bad girl. She hasn't gotten in trouble. She lives at home as the
Mhm.
youngest. She's spoiled, but not excessively so.
I would say she's smart but not sophisticated,
Uh-huh.
and she's also very stunted, um,
Okay, that makes sense.
and she is unpleasant.
She is.
Period.
Yeah.
Period. And
There's
I
no
think
but. There's no but there.
No, she is
Yeah.
an unpleasant person,
Uh-huh.
and she has a princess complex.
Right.
She is not a bad person though, but she's maybe somebody you don't want to hang around with. And I think, I mean, in talking to other people, especially people with sisters or female cousins or female friends,
Mm.
everyone knows a Maritza,
Mm.
or shades of Maritza. Um, it doesn't, I think for me, I grew to love Maritza more and more, even though at first I felt very disconnected from her.
Yeah.
And throughout the book, I think when I said to myself that her story was just as valid as Lucina's and Claudia's, um, I her stuntedness, I think, spoke volumes to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people want an arc, want
Sure.
a character to redeem themselves, and such as in life, some people don't go past a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
And it took place in a month. So Maritza's not going to go from stunted to a fully actualized woman in 4 weeks.
Yeah, 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 of course not.
Not going to happen
Mm-hmm.
ever.
Right. Right.
There's no therapy in her future.
No.
She is as she was, as Claudia says.
She is and she was. Yeah, definitely. That's a great way to describe it. And yeah, I mean, I think maybe there's something natural about kind of the reader being drawn to her as like the protagonist, if you had just because she's first
Mm-hmm.
in the line, right? But we get obviously an equal. We hear from the others equally. She is bent on this marriage, and as the
Mm-hmm.
book goes on, you're just saying why, you know, Augie is it Agostino? Is that his full name?
Agostino, yes.
Agostino, you know, all the little nice little tricks you have. He's Augie. He's a mama's boy
Mm-hmm.
to the extreme, right? And he doesn't seem to be a terrible guy. We learned some stuff towards the end that might change our mind, but he doesn't seem to be a terrible guy. He's just immature. He's stunted. We know a lot of man children like him, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe I have some of those qualities, right? But he's a video game player. He's still living at home, etc. Um, my Italian grandmother would have said, I think it's the same as testadura, right? Maritza. She is stubborn, stubborn, stubborn,
Yes.
stubborn. She is going to go through with it, no matter if there are 27 red flags, right?
Right, because they're all her flags, you know.
Uh-huh.
She's gonna do what she wants to do,
Yes.
period. And you have to, in a certain way, admire or have somebody that has the gall to do that.
Hmm.
And they're not going to she's not going to get in trouble, right?
Right.
But just to go ahead and do it,
Mhm.
I would pat someone on the back. I think that what she ends up doing is probably the most honest thing in the book.
Yeah. No, no doubt about it. We have Claudia, who has moved out. She, like you said, she's taught herself or learned to, quote unquote, not speak like Boa Heights. She's modulated was a term you used. She went to was it Princeton, right?
Mhm.
She went to Princeton. She's a big time, she's a big time producer in Hollywood. Um, but she's also is she the oldest?
She's the middle sister.
She is the middle, okay.
Mhm.
But she has a lot of older sister qualities. She took care of Dooley on so many occasions.
Mhm.
Sometimes quietly.
Mhm.
Dooley, we'll talk about had definitely had some substance abuse issues. But Claudia is a giver for sure. Is a helper of her sisters, even if when they get into trouble, sometimes of their own making.